Conversas para cuidar. Um mundo melhor começa em ti.
Bom dia, este é mais um podcast do Conversas para Cuidar e eu hoje estou com a Katrin Hauser. I don't know if I speak correctly. E vai ser o primeiro podcast de Conversas para Cuidar em inglês. Se tu não te sentir desconfortável com o idioma e quiseres ainda assim ouvir o podcast, nós vamos disponibilizar uma tradução em português, em texto, para quem quiser conhecer um pouco mais das conversas para cuidar que nós vamos fazer hoje. And let's begin. Today our podcast with Conversas para Cuidar is with Katrin Hauser. I meet Katrin for her work with the body and mind related to chronic pain and trauma. Her work is about the never-ending exploration of the body and mind and a way of discovering the beauty of life. She believes as we bring awareness to what is happening inside and where we are in the present moment, our body will be encouraged to release what it's holding. Then we can embark on a journey of restoration and growth. So here's the question that is also the topic of our conversation today. Why are we in so much pain? Okay, Katrin, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here. I'd like to start the conversation by asking you, how did you first came to yoga, and tell you your story for our listeners.
Firstly, thank you so much for inviting me, Camila. It's a great pleasure. And thank you so much for allowing me to do this in English. I have lived in Portugal for over 8 years now, and I am really ashamed to say that although I do speak Portuguese, I would probably struggle to do this. So thank you so much for letting me speak English here and share my story. So I came to yoga, I guess, quite late in life. I used to dance when I was younger. I started dance when I was 6, and that was my life. And then as a teenager, I got diagnosed with scoliosis, but I carried on dancing, but I had to do a lot of physiotherapy. And then in my 20s, I decided, because physio was very boring, that I would do Pilates. I would do Pilates to maybe support my back. So it was dance and Pilates. And I tried 1 or 2 yoga classes, but I was literally like, no, thank you. I didn't get it. I didn't understand why I had to spend a whole hour upside down for some reason. It was not for me. I could not translate it in my body. Mm-hmm. And then one time at work, so this was probably when I was about 30, I was working in the media industry. Somebody said, "Oh, come to yoga at the gym here at work. It's a great class. Mm-hmm. You will love it." I'm like, no. I was still resisting. And they kept asking. I was like, okay, fine. Just so you can shut up. I will come to the class. And I quite liked it. It was different. It was, at the time, it was a vinyasa yoga class. I really liked the teacher. She was really down to earth, talking my language. I could relate to her. And there was this other thing. I found it quite challenging. Suddenly, I've danced my whole life. I coordination, movement. I was good at that. But suddenly I had to follow verbal instruction and translate that into movement, which is very different how you learn dance. Dance, you learn from observing through your eyes. And I was like, whoa, this is different. I'm not so good at this. And then there was also a whole lot of positions that I thought were impossible. I mean, you know, she would ask us to come into downward facing dog and relax for 5 breaths. I'm like, there is nothing relaxing about downward facing dog. So I kind of took on the challenge. I was like, this is not going to beat me. I'm going to conquer this. So I stayed. I went to the class. I enjoyed it. And then she brought in a flyer one day. She was offering a retreat. And I said, oh, why not? It was in Turkey. I'd never been to Turkey. So I went along to the retreat. And this was maybe 6 months into practicing with her. And it was then on that retreat that there was something else happening. And I suddenly realized, oh, hang on a second, there is something else going on here. This is not just the physical
body
exercise. This could be good for my spine, I think, but there is something else. And there it was. I came back from that holiday. I remember people in the office asked me what I had taken because they wanted some of that. I must have just been like floating through the office.
What kind of drugs?
Yes. So, okay. And then it was even those people again at some point, they said, you should teach this. You love this so much. Look at you. You're changing. Everything is, this is amazing. And I was like, I don't think so. I mean, I had a career in media, and I was like, I can never do a headstand, and I never will. It's not going to happen. So I can't teach yoga. It's, and then, at some point I did a headstand, and not that that is necessary. You could be a yoga teacher and not do headstand. But, obviously one day I did stand on my head and I signed up to
but it's
yoga
curious.
teacher.
It's curious because I came from the media also. I am advertising. I work with the advertising and the journalism, and I used it to work a lot of hours with tension in my body. And then when I start to do yoga, I become to listen where the tensions are. And I'm not so I need to treat myself because I don't have time to listen my body.
Yeah.
And then why what a point that you came to teach this kind of therapeutic yoga. Can you share some aha moments with us when you realize there is something more that's only giving classes, doing classes? I think maybe it's in the retreat, it's a point change.
That was the first point, I think. And, there were many little moments in yoga. I hear so many stories from people and they are all very similar. How yoga has this way of directing you in different directions. Looking back now, I'm not surprised that I ended up working with the body and through the body, because really my whole life I've done movement. There was a focus on my body through my scoliosis, which I also had to wear a corset for when I was a teenager. And and I'm not surprised that somehow I came back to that. I didn't know I was a teacher, or that was in me, and that just kind of happened and opened up at some point. But there were definitely a number of moments that I realized, okay, there is something interesting here. One is that as soon as I started yoga, I stopped dancing. And it wasn't a deliberate kind of decision, weighing up the pros and cons. It just happened. And so I think looking back on that, I feel there was this wisdom in my body coming out and knowing there was a different potential, a different therapeutic approach, something that I needed to do different for my own body to deal with my issues around my back. I also remember it was halfway through my teacher training. My teacher training was 2 years long, as a 500-hour right from the start. And I started to have more issues on the right side of my body from my scoliosis. I would have massage all the time. I would see a cranial osteopath at some point every week, you know, for 3 months. And I count myself so lucky that by that point I had already been exposed to some other teachers who spoke to me about fascia, who spoke to me about, you know, just about structural integration, about a different form of moving. And I had also come across some Scaravelli-inspired yoga teachers. And I knew of this lady who was teaching in the area where I live in London. And it turned out that she actually lived a 3-minute walk from my house, which in London is like unheard of. It takes at least an hour to get from wherever you are to wherever you want to go. And this wonderful person lived literally almost next door. And I started to take one-to-one Scaravelli-inspired yoga classes with her. The same week I started to work with her, I stopped going to the osteopath because I didn't have to anymore. And yes, you might say, okay, but then you had a weekly session with somebody else. Yes, but that was empowering me to take control back, because it was teaching me a different way of getting to know my body, a different way of moving, and gave me the tools, me the control to undo the tension and the pain that was developing in my body. So that was a really important moment, because that moved me into a very different, more therapeutic direction. And so when it came to then starting to work as a teacher, I also realized I wanted to do a bit more. And so I started to train in body work and Thai massage. And that was a whole other deep dive. And, you know, so I kept moving into that therapeutic direction. And that comes from my own story, really, I guess. One of the other really important moments was, this was maybe, so I was working with 2 Scaravelli-inspired teachers at that point. And maybe after 1 year of working with this one teacher, I went to see him for a session, and he asked me to just lie down and do my thing and arrive for a moment. And it was very rare that he would give me any time to myself, because he's so passionate about the thing. You get involved very quickly, but he gave me just a few moments, and I lay down with my feet standing on the floor, and I did a little thing. And then he said, that looks better. And I was like, hang on. Like, it took me a whole year. I was teaching yoga at this point already, huh? Don't forget. So it took me a whole year for me to lie down the way you want me to lie down. Never mind any yoga pose or any, you know, headstand, what I was thinking before. Just lying down and relating to the ground again and understanding the ground, you know. So as part of that, I was just so lucky to have had really inspirational teachers. This sounds a little bit silly, this story, but actually this was like my inspiration, and gave me the understanding that there was a very different way that we can relate to the body, that we can speak to the body, that the body needs to be treated very differently, you know. Like, it was always about my right side, and I didn't understand that actually my left side wanted equal rights, you know. I needed to just treat my body equally again as a whole, and not get so wrapped up in that story of the pain. I was embodying that story of the pain. It was through those teachers that I really learned there was a different way of relating. And they helped me befriend my body really again. So yeah, those were probably some of the key moments. I could go on. There was quite a few.
Okay, but I'm listening to you, and when you start to talking about listen the body and the way that we can be related with our body, then start give us the question why we have are we so much pain, and we have a lot of different pains that we cannot understand, like chronic pain, autoimmune diseases. Can you give a quick overview of that, and if yoga and other treatments can be helpful?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we as a society, suffer from a lot of pain. It's really a pandemic in this. It's, one of the main diseases. And I don't have the numbers to hand now, but there are some really impressive statistics on how much money is spent on treating pain, in comparison to treating other severe conditions. So let's actually maybe think about what is pain in the first place. What actually is pain?
Mm-hmm.
One most important thing that I think we all need to always remember, that there is no physiological or laboratory test that we can use to identify or to even measure pain. Pain is always what a person says it is. So that needs to be the starting point. And we need to really understand that, because quite often, especially people with chronic pain, they get dismissed very quickly. And that's not helpful. Different levels of pain in response to exactly the same stimulus may be experienced very, very differently by each individual. There is just simply no uniform pain threshold. It doesn't exist. So why do we experience pain in the first place? It's really a warning signal in the body. So one is to identify that there is something harmful, and it tells us to withdraw from that. Oh, that's too hot. Okay, that's dangerous. You need to take your hand off. Otherwise, you're going to burn yourself. And then it will teach us to avoid those things in the future. Now we've learned that it's hot because we've burnt our fingers, and then we are less likely to do that again. And then also, if there is an injury, the pain is there to help to protect that part of the body during the healing process. So you might have noticed, like when you have a cut, for example, you cut yourself, that hurts a lot in the beginning, but at some point you put your plaster on and it doesn't actually hurt anymore, but the cut is still there.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, like the injury is still there. It just doesn't hurt anymore. And that's because at some point the brain has processed that the danger is over. No, the pain is not happening where we cut our finger. The pain is a signal from the brain. But it will hurt again if we then accidentally touch that finger where the cut is, or bang it against a piece of furniture or something. Then we go, wow, damn, I forgot about the cut on my finger. Because obviously that would be a risk to the healing process. So the brain sends another pain signal. So overall, I'm so fascinated by the design of the body. I think this is just so extraordinary. This process of how the body has come up with this design. And it is one of our survival mechanisms, because the brain has this ability to detect that potential harmful stimulus. It helps us ultimately to survive, because biologically that's really all we are interested in as an individual living being, as well as a species.
It's a signal. It's a signal of our body that
exactly.
something is not right.
Exactly. So then there are different types of pain. And for a very long time, it was kind of categorized in two areas. One was nociceptive, which is inflammatory pain. So that is pain in response to that cut in the finger, to an injury, to a burn, to a fracture. Could also be an illness. It's detected by pain receptors in the skin, in the bones, or other tissues. And very typically that's acute. No, it's because of heat or cold or acidity, or could be something mechanical or inflammation. It could be after surgery, for example, or something mechanical in the lower back, or tendonitis, for example, or things like that. So, and that is something that heals also. We know it takes, a few weeks, but then that tissue will heal. And so it's acute, it doesn't really stay forever. And then there is this other. Did you want to say something? Sorry.
No. It's like a temporary heal.
Exactly.
You have pain for a specific time.
Exactly. And it should not last that long. Like if you're still feeling pain after like 6 weeks, then something is not quite right. Then we have something, or the area that we would call chronic pain. In the past, we categorized as neuropathic pain. So chronic pain was usually associated with some kind of nerve damage, where the nervous system itself was damaged. So that could literally be that nerves have been severed, or they carry nerves that have been literally injured and damaged, that carry that sensory signal from those tissues to the brain and the spinal cord. And that would be very often chronic and ongoing for a long time. That could be a result of a viral infection, obviously also serious injuries after like a serious car crash, for example. There is various forms of neuropathy, things like sciatica also, where nerves are pinched, after a stroke, multiple sclerosis. So it's a bunch of things where we are talking of actual damage to the nerves, and that can cause chronic pain. And those were the two camps for a long time. And then people would go and see a doctor, and they would see another 10 specialists because they had chronic pain, but there was just nothing that they could find that was wrong with them. They were just told, well, it's in your head. I can't help you. Goodbye. I mean, no disrespect to the medical profession, of course, and of course, it's also a case of there've been now so many more advances in pain science that we have a better understanding. So a lot of the chronic pain is what we call nociplastic, and that pain arises from effectively alterations alterations in the nociceptive function. So it's like an error in the switchboard. There's an error in the body's danger detection and pain processing system. I kind of imagine these old phone switchboards, when phone calls had to be sort of literally physically be plugged, from one end to the other. And somehow that just all got muddled up. So the information is not being processed properly. And that then basically is a disturbance in the central pain processing. So it is, when they were saying, well, it's all happening in your head, in a way, that was actually true, because it is something that's happening in the brain, but it is a real thing. And a lot of chronic conditions that are still very difficult to diagnose and difficult to get treatments for, like fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue and IBS, they will fall into that category.
it's difficult to deal with and difficult to understand. I have fibromyalgia, and some days I'm very fine, some days I'm with extreme fatigue. And I will ask you, what's the participation of the memory in those things? The body understands that this kind of pain, maybe it's associated with some memory. What's the language that we are talking about? What's the language of the body?
Yeah, it's something like a pain spiral. I look at it that way. The body can learn pain. So it kind of begins to increase in this feedback loop. And the central nervous system becomes hyper excitable. So there is any kind of form of stimulus can be perceived way stronger than by somebody else, maybe. So pain can present in different areas of the body. It can present at different points in time over that person's life, which also means it's very, very difficult to diagnose or to treat or to manage. But this is something that we often find that when people start with, they have a generalized, they have a pain somewhere. Maybe they have pain in the knee. Maybe there's some osteoarthritis going on or something. But when you then start to look at their sensitivity in their pain system, they have a much lower pain threshold throughout the rest of the body as well. So what could start as maybe jaw pain might gradually then evolve into other conditions because of this hypersensitivity, because the body has then learned the pain. And that is also to do with that error in the danger and pain processing system. Also, we get the smallest little touch on the skin, but because we remember that, maybe we had a big accident or something where we really banged this arm into something and we nearly died from it, or something, I don't know, or a spider bit us, or something really dangerous that nearly killed us. The brain goes into a real hypersensitivity on that, and we'll go, wow, like, what's going on here? And it was nothing, but the body still has that memory. The brain has that memory. That is whenever we have any sensory input through the nervous system, we ask parts of the brain, do we have a memory of this situation? And what would be an appropriate response? And if that memory is that we got bitten by a spider and nearly died last time, then of course we will come up with a, objectively speaking, not very appropriate response to something that is just a little brush on the arm. And so that's a very simplified story. But it's something like that because the body and the brain can learn pain, which then leads to the spiral, so of hypersensitivity. And that's how I always look at my mother. She has some arthritis in some of her joints, but her general sensitivity to kind of things that can be painful, like I could just maybe think of her toes and she would already kind of jerk and be afraid. I haven't even mentioned them or touched them, but I'm exaggerating, of course, but sometimes it feels a little bit like that. If I just look at her toes, she's already on alert, even though nobody has touched them yet. And that's for protection. That's her way. The body knows, whoa, this is danger. And I need to survive. So it creates that response.
And because of that, people like that, we are always on the alert mood. Something will happen, something will hurt, and you think that our lifestyle, our modern lifestyle, has something with that, with all diseases.
I do. So I really want to say at this point that, I really want to acknowledge that pain and chronic pain is really complex. So in what I'm saying, I really don't want to oversimplify it. And I also certainly don't want to diagnose anybody's problems, and mean no disrespect. And for example, there are a whole number of autoimmune disorders where chronic pain is one of the symptoms, and that's not what I'm speaking to. I want to speak to four things in my mind that I think we need to look at when we are talking of the chronic pain that we as a whole society suffer from. And one of those is our modern lifestyle not being particularly helpful. So by modern lifestyle, I mean a number of things. It starts with putting our children on chairs, wearing shoes, walking on concrete most of the time, and having a lot of things making life more convenient, which means we don't have to really do a lot of the movement that actually we are designed to do. We don't climb trees anymore or rocks so much because we climb up a ladder, and so now if we realize, oh damn, I put something right at the top of the shelf, how silly. Again, we don't climb up the shelf to get it, but again, we step on a chair and we just about reach for it. So what all of this means is we lose a certain degree of our body's intelligence because of that. Because there is just certain movement we don't use anymore, we don't do. Our feet really wearing very bad shoes, most of us, are almost, it's a little bit over the top, but, almost crippled. We abuse our feet wearing these shoes. They lose their agility, their strength, their mobility, their flexibility, their intelligence, the proprioception that comes from our feet. Our feet are designed to walk barefoot over uneven ground, and they're not designed to be that narrow at all. They're really designed to be much wider. And so what that means, it leads to a poor mapping of movement and our whole body. Everything just loses a little bit of its intelligence. Things are not mapped the way that they could be on our brain because we don't use it. And like the opposite, we use less and we squash the feet into shoes, or, so we lose some of our interoception, we lose some of our proprioception, we lose range of motion altogether. And that means there's a poorer mapping of movement on the brain. And that means that when something does hurt, or when there is pain or an injury or something going on, it's much easier for that to then travel through the rest of the body without us really noticing, or to stay, or to even happen in the first place without us really noticing because of the poor mapping. We don't realize. And so pain has a much easier time to spread in the body and to take hold of the body because we've numbed down our body's intelligence through our modern lifestyle. If you're living in a much more natural environment, your body's intelligence will be much more alert and will therefore be able to really perceive much more clearly, this is pain, this is danger, this is fine, this is just pressure, this is some discomfort, this is okay. But we lose that ability because everything, our body's intelligence gets numbed down through our modern lifestyle. So that's how, in my mind, that plays a big part. And I can see that, with the people that I work with. Number two, and it's related to that, is our broken relationship to gravity. This is something that comes from Feldenkrais, has spoken about that a lot. And I love that idea because, or like the words of that, because you might say, well, how can, gravity doesn't stop. It's not like we are floating off the ground. How can our relationship to gravity be broken? That's nonsense. But it can be broken. And that is, again, because we wear shoes, we walk on concrete, because we sit on chairs. That is one of the reasons. We are just simply not in our full structural support. We're not really allowing ourselves to rest properly through our bones. And that is because we are a lot in contraction. So, for example, the fact that you have to stand tall, sit straight, sit upright, or that we pull our tummies in because we don't want our belly to show, or, those kind of things. All of that contraction is pulling upright. You can try it if you are wherever you are sitting and you get told, sit straight, child, sit upright.
Yes.
But what that means is you're pulling yourself up and away from the ground, and we're not really able to rest through our bones anymore. We forget how to do it because we develop habits, and therefore we forget how to really do that. We're not yielding. When you watch animals in the wild, the way that they can move so fast, hardly touching the ground, but because they're in relationship with the ground properly. When you see animals, whether they're in the wild or domesticated, the way they can rest, they're just,
Yes.
they just,
It's a peace.
They yield over whatever, like this tree or the pillow, or they always find the perfect arrangement in that little corner or wherever it is. They're yielding into their environment. And again, through our modern lifestyle, we are losing some of that. And all you need to do is, like, if you walk barefoot over grass, for example, your body instantly feels different walking. There's an intelligence that wakes up and it goes, there's something here that reminds me of my innate nature of how I'm supposed to move over this earth, because we're barefoot and we're on soft soil. So try that, and that is what I'm talking about. And what that also leads to is, again, poorer mapping, poorer interoception, less sensory awareness in our body. And so a lot of pain, I think, is a result of that. And as I said, Moshe Feldenkrais talks a lot about that, and in some statements said, that's really your primary reason for all the pain that you have. Remember, I was telling you the story of taking a whole year to lie down on the ground. Yes. The way my teacher wanted me to. So what does that tell me? I was doing dance my whole life. I was doing not only dance, but African dance. I thought grounding, where the ground is, the earth, I got it. That's surely not something that I need to learn as a concept. And yet I was carrying so much habitual tension and so many patterns in my body that I was not able to relate to the ground and give my bones to the ground properly without my muscles feeling the need to hold on to them. And it took me a year to unlearn that habit. A year to unlearn that habit, to really let my bones settle on the ground. And when you get that moment, it's a delicious feeling. I do remember that. It's so different. And you notice, and it's wonderful. Even when I, also when I work with students and they have these little moments going like, oh wow, I just didn't realize I was holding so much and onto so much. And that seems to have gone now that I'm, kind of relating to the ground again.
And when you release your body, you release your emotions also. It's a kind of trust. Okay, I decided to learn how to rest. To learn how to really feel my body.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful work. It's a beautiful process.
I was talking also about that contraction, and that's another, I want to actually give that its own sort of place. So the third thing is that contraction that it takes to get through just a normal day in today's world. I think it takes so much bravery to show up in life today for any normal day, never mind a day where we are facing challenges. And that's our protection mechanism. That's our nervous system at its best, of course, protecting us again and is interested in our survival. But it does mean that we are putting on this armor, a protection shield, and that leads to so much tension in the diaphragm and so many other areas of the body. And again, that pulls us away from the ground. So I think that's such a big factor. I kind of almost want to really give that its own acknowledgement. And another thing that's related with that, I think, is also our lack of connection in today's society and in our modern lifestyle. It's all related. But we are beings of relation by nature. But now we live in a culture where we are not really in community anymore so much, and so we don't have the support of a community. We lack that sense of, let me put it this way: we struggle to deal with our environment, our direct environment, most of the time, right? We don't know how to feel comfortable and how to feel safe in our environment a lot of the time. And that has a huge impact. And there are many studies on that kind of lack of connection with others that contributes so much to our well-being. And I think, again, that leads to that contraction in the body that we spoke about. That means we are not in relation to the ground. And, so, and again, and we're not in our natural state of being when we're not in relation. We do not survive in isolation. And again, that I think that is a big contributing factor in that picture that we see in today's society of a lot of chronic pain.
It's a lot of things that we have to do. And tell me, what can we do to find our way back to a sense of easy in your body? What role can yoga take it here?
Yeah. I mean, you kind of really said it. So we need to find ways to find that ease again, or to find our way back, right? I did say the word lose. You lose your intelligence or whatever I said earlier. That's actually not quite right. I don't believe in that. It is innate, our relationship to gravity and that we are beings of relation and all of that. But it gets numbed down And so it is that is our mission. We need to find ways of coming back into more of our natural state of being. And there's a few things that I think, can do. Yoga, I believe, is a wonderful practice to help us with that, but it's not the only practice. I mentioned Feldenkrais already. There's lots of other beautiful somatic practices. And it could be dance, it could be horse riding, it could be, it could be really many, many different things. But something to distinguish is whether it is a practice where we foster awareness, or whether we're doing something for exercise or for performance. And they are not bad, they're fine. If I want to build strength, I need exercise. If I want to be performing, I need to practice and perform, that's fine. But when we want to address this issue of the chronic pain and finding our way back to ease in the body, I think we need to find a practice where awareness is really an integral part. And when I say awareness, it's a big overused word in yoga. No, we talk about awareness left, right, and center, and it's lost almost its meaning because we use it so much. But to me, that is a real neurological process of mapping or remapping, I should say, the body and movement on the nervous system. And I spoke about habits already. Our body, a huge part of our ability is because we are built to habituate. The only way we can learn is by developing a habit. I mean, just imagine you have to learn how to move your fork to your mouth to eat again and again and again and again. It's that, you have habituated that movement, so now you've learned it. But over our lifetime, we build a lot of unhelpful habits, a lot of habitual holding. So I think one role that yoga can take is to disrupt those, to give them a really good shake-up, and to then also, on the flip side, refine and create new, more useful habits. And you can do that in many different ways. And there's so many different styles of yoga. I would definitely say, in my opinion, and it's no criticism, it's no disrespect, I think some forms of yoga will do that more and others will do it less. And that's okay. There are different styles of yoga and they do different things. In my mind, for me, yoga, from my own story with my back, my scoliosis, I was embodying that pain. I was building a whole habit around that pain. It was important to find a different way, a more therapeutic way and a slower way of practice, where fostering sensory awareness, interoception was really the main focus. And then it becomes almost like more of a meditation with your body than a workout. It's definitely never a workout. We need to take more time to pause and to notice, really notice. And noticing is so important in this context, because a lot of pain came from not noticing in the first place, right?
Yes.
So one key element in finding our way back to the ease in the body and being comfortable in our environment is to help people to notice again those points. Where is that actual point where I become uncomfortable? What is okay? What is not okay? And to really be able to discern between sensation and pain. As much as the body was able to learn pain and go into that spiral, we can also teach the body again to differentiate between, is it pain or is it another sensation? And we start to notice again. So we need to re-educate a lot and undo a lot of what we are holding in the body. Part of
Do
that.
you think that?
Yeah.
Sorry. Do you think that sensation can be the beginning of the pain, or it's different? It's totally different.
I think, we used to, from an evolutionary point, from when we are a small child or baby and a child, we learn from sensory input. We don't learn because we've processed that in a smart way in our brain. I mean, just imagine, you try to walk and you fall over 20 times. Why bother? We would give up, if we had to walk. And so learning when we're at that age is very different, and it's from sensory input. And so I think we can really build on that to help people understand the sensations better, to bring them into proper full awareness, to process that. And it takes more time than we give it in many exercise and also yoga classes that are more fast paced. They have a different focus. That's okay again. But for the nervous system to really do that learning process, it takes a bit more time. And so we need to pause a lot more. And then, pain is is sensory nerves processing something, but they are pain recepting nerves, right? So it's that ability to distinguish between what is pressure, what is discomfort, what is fear, and what's actual pain. And if you think of what pain is a danger signal. Alarm bells should go off. Don't do this. This is dangerous. You might die from this. So, for example, going back to the headstand, one of my amazing teachers, and I have a lot of this from Peter Blackaby, he would only really get people to explore some level of headstand, to let people explore that. At which point do you feel uncomfortable? And what is that discomfort? Is it fear? Is it actual pain somewhere on your head or in the neck or wherever? Or, is it just pressure on the top of the head that you're not used to? It's an unfamiliar sensation, but you're not processing that accurately. You're perceiving it as pain when in reality it is only pressure. Because pain should only be there if you were about to do something really dangerous, right? If your head wasn't able to carry your weight. You can argue whether maybe the skull shouldn't carry the weight of the whole body, but that's a different argument. But so he would only get people to explore and play with the beginnings of a headstand, or maybe take them into headstand, doesn't matter, to figure that out, but nothing else. Not because it's a great pose or because it does all sorts of other things that apparently headstands do. That's irrelevant. But it's such a great example of how we can unravel that for people. Where is the discomfort? Where is the comfortable zone? Is it because you're afraid, because it's unfamiliar? Is it pressure that you're perceiving as pain? Is it really pain? And so on. So that can be really, really helpful. And it's such a great, and it's fun. It's actually, there's a bit of fun in that, learning that, so a lot of that is to do with safety also, right? So when we're saying pain is to do with alarm bells going off, we need to establish a lot of safety for people. So again, the grounding comes into that. We spoke about that earlier. You mentioned also, when we're really grounding, there is a letting go, maybe there's something emotional happening. So how can we create a comfortable environment where people feel brave to explore these alternative options? I think that's one of the main things. And then we can think of restoring vitality as well, and foster some agency, and maybe think about how is the practice more doable? How can we make it more sustainable and break it down so it's actually achievable? And then there is one other aspect with people who are dealing with persistent pain is that we need to actually keep doing things. So one default kind of position we take is to not do something when it hurts, right? And then we get told, well, just don't do that bit, or sit that out, or find another way, or do something else instead. But the thing is, the body is fantastic at adapting. Its ability to adapt, its adaptability, basically stands for health. The more adaptable the body is, the healthier you are, because you can adjust and adapt to whatever comes your way. And then the body processes that and finds a way, and a way to cope, a way to manage just fine. Certain things don't heal, they don't need to heal, or certain things we live with forever, but the body adapts beautifully. But it can only adapt if we keep doing things. If we stop doing things, it will stop adapting. And so when it comes to really working with people with chronic pain, that's something that we really need to understand. How can we get people to do things again, and to bear some weight through those bones, and to bend those knees, or whatever it is that they're saying, oh, I can't do that. No, how can we keep doing things? Very important.
Learning again how to do things that people tell us that is not supposed to do with our condition. And a last question that I have to you, it's why it's fundamental that teachers understand how to create a trauma-informed environment when they are working with people with persistent pain.
Yeah.
The language that we use, the approach.
Yeah. I'm a great believer in creating more trauma-informed spaces. We already spoke to how chronic pain also has to do with people struggling to relate to their environment. We also now know that people are much more likely to deal with chronic pain if they've had many surgeries, for example, if they have experienced abuse, emotional or physical abuse during their childhood, if they are maybe suffering from depression, and all of these might have left or could be signs of unprocessed trauma. So we know there is a direct relationship. And the other aspect of it is that actually, no matter where that chronic pain really comes from, that's a whole other discussion really around trauma, but having to live with persistent pain is very stressful and very overwhelming in itself. So people will be very activated in some way just as a result of that. Managing any chronic condition is very, very stressful. So we are already looking at a dysregulated nervous system. And for those reasons alone, and I know we're running out of time, but I could speak to the needs for more trauma-informed spaces forever. It's a whole other podcast. But I think it's really important that we create a comfortable space where people can be brave to explore new possibilities. And that means, first of all, we need to assume that anyone and everyone walking into our class brings at least one story, if not a whole bunch of stories. They're not written on people's foreheads, so we should not make any assumptions. They might be very dormant and just bubbling away somewhere quietly. But, I think that's why yoga teachers become yoga teachers, to support their community, to work with people, to support them with their life challenges. And by definition, to me, that actually just means being more trauma-informed. And then we need to create a trauma-informed space, because only when there is a felt sense of safety, and that is very relative, there's no absolute way of doing this, but we know that healing and growth and change can only really happen when we feel fundamentally comfortable and safe in our own being. And so I think as a yoga teacher or any facilitator of any form of activity, creating that safe space has got to be our priority. That's kind of where we need to start.
Yes, and then we can change the way that we can change our smallest world, and then change little by little, and make self places to practice, to receive students at all. I thank you for sharing all those things and your experience that can serve inspiration not only for me, for a lot of people. You want to say something until the end of the podcast? You want to say something?
Only thank you so much for having this conversation. These conversations are so important, and it's great that they are happening. So thank you so much for inviting me, really, so I can share just a little part of my story. And yeah, I look forward to connecting more.
Yeah, I can be trauma-informed yoga, a podcast only for trauma-informed yoga.
Let's do it.
Okay. Thank you so much, Katrin.
Thank you.
Bye.
Acabaste de ouvir Conversas para Cuidar, uma produção de Camila Yogini, com amor por ti.